Are you ready for spooky Halloween season?
Are you starting?
I started.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if you were asking me or saying it generally.
This is the best time of year because it's Sally Halloween. Are you ready, Amber?
Yes, absolutely.
Why do you love this time of year?
Because at this time of year, the veil between the other world and our world is thinnest. So there's a lot of energy in the air, and I just enjoy it.
You ride that wave. You ride that thin veil wave. Just for everybody who's like, what are they talking about? What other world is there? If you've listened to some of our conversations in the past, it is when our dimension, our reality, and the higher dimensions, or lower, if you will, but like higher dimensions, that gap between, let's say we're in 3D and they're in 5D and above, that like 4D gap really closes. So if that's closing, all of the other gaps also are closing. So it really consolidates their ability to push through and be able to say, what's up? For everybody who's new, I'm Joanna, and I am a holistic lifestyle coach. I help women through nutrition raise their vibration to discover their soul's purpose. I'm diving more into the energy work, but for most of it, Amber.
My name is Amber. I am a psychic medium and Reiki master.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Right to the point, This is a really unique time of year that if you're starting to tap into spirituality, there's a reason why there's this deeper connection to October, especially the end of October. So we were doing a dive into Samhain, and we learned that it was the Gaelic marking of the end of the harvesting season. So for the past few years for myself, I got really into this intuitively. I didn't realize that there was such a connection to the tradition and end of harvesting season. Usually what happens is at the very beginning of fall, people tend to sow seeds. They give an offering back to the earth. They burn through their intentions. There are different various traditions that you could do. It depends on what you're most intuitively connected to, or if you're just in need of guidance, you kind of mark your way through different elements. The basic elements are earth, metal, fire, air. Did I miss one?
Water.
Water. Cool. So basically you use those to kind of combine your deeper connection, and then you send through an offering. It's a little bit more layered than that, but once you start getting into it, it's really simple. But what you're doing is you're showing that you are ready and willing to connect, and you're really willing to sacrifice certain things in order to make room for new. You're planting those seeds. So Samhain, Halloween, is basically that closing, that last time of the harvesting year. Something that we were really excited to kind of tap into a little bit more in this conversation is getting into a little bit more of mythical creatures. Like amongst a lot of other traditions over time, it's gotten skewed. There's a lot of misnomers, misassociations with all of them. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about the through line between all of the cultures and the importance of this month.
So, different regions kind of celebrate this thin veil differently or view it differently. Some are a little bit more, I guess, superstitious, where they will have, like, I think originally there were different views on the purpose of jack-o'-lanterns. So some use them to kind of scare off evil spirits, while as others kind of put them there to help their relatives find their way back home. Other ones will put them there to like honor the spirits that can't go, I think it was like not in heaven, not in hell. They're just like in this in between. That's a little bit more religious, but
purgatory.
Yeah, a lot of superstitions arise just due to the fear of the unknown. But then there's also some that don't necessarily follow that and just kind of bring in and accept.
What I've learned is that there's absolutely, I think like everything else, a misuse and abuse of what your capabilities are,
Mm-hmm.
And when you are trying to basically override what your blueprint is by creating some sort of, how do I say, like dark magic, it's not going to be pretty, but it is powerful because the veil is so thin, and power of free will, you're able to override. So I think that while there are so many people of light and good intention, and if you do want to tap into spirituality and you are really curious but you're hesitant, like there are so many good people trying to raise the vibration, and I think now more than ever, especially as the veil's thin, like it's time to really honor this month and do what you can to connect and show up for not just yourself, but for the spirits who are also trying to help bring the fifth dimension through as smoothly as possible. It's such a powerful month to do stuff like that. But yeah, there's no question that people misuse this type of power for not so good, and that's definitely what a fear is. Like I've heard not great stories, and even in your experiences, I'm sure, like things that you've seen in the ethers, it can be ugly. It can be.
It can, but I think the beautiful thing about free will is if somebody's trying to attack your free will by putting some kind of something on you, whether it be a spell or some kind of weird energy, whatever, you do have the free will to not accept it.
I didn't know that. Like I thought that I thought that you could work your way through it and rebuke it eventually. but if somebody's doing that to you, I thought it just like you have to deal with the curse.
No, you're good. You can literally be like, no, thank you. That specifically, I feel like a lot of people don't understand. So that specifically makes people a little bit nervous. But anytime somebody's screwing with your free will, you have power over that always. So if you're scared, you're allowing it to come on and you're just kind of like allowing whatever weird stuff to happen. But if you're just like, if you feel something weird, and you're just like, nope, I don't want this. I don't accept this. Return it back to the sender, then that's that.
And you just have to really believe it then. Like really believe it and really honor it.
It's sometimes, depending on the person or the energy being sent your way, it might take a little bit more energy where you might ask your guides or something. But from what I've seen, that's usually in more severe cases. The majority of them are just basically instilling fear in the person, which is then causing a lot of things to kind of spiral down, so again, it's like if you have a dark spirit in your space or something like that, it's literally the same thing. You just have to say, no, thank you. I don't want this. Leave me alone. This isn't my energy. I don't need it. Does not belong here. Take it back.
And I think that's a really good point to bring up, that there are people who will take advantage, who themselves as, psychic mediums and everything, being like, there's this huge ass process that we have to go through in order to, get rid of blank, blank, and blank. And that's not always the case. Like that's very rarely the case. And if that happens to you, like, before you get too deep, like get out of that and find somebody who is able to show you how powerful you are, because you are.
Some cultures I know do, because that's where like rituals come in, but I feel like for the most part, rituals are just kind of allowing us to instill or further allow us to like believe in what we're doing, just because we're human and we are three-dimensional and we work best when we have like evidence and like proof, like I'm physically going like this and that means I don't know, this is like confetti is spraying clearing the air, I don't know. So sometimes that'll help us, but I feel like because as a collective we're raising so much, that need for like ritualistic practices are becoming a little bit less necessary. Do them if you want to, but just know that you already hold that power within yourself. There are some exceptions to that, but for the most part.
Yeah, of course. There's always going to be those exceptions. And I do think that people also have to understand that there's like, we talked about in prior conversations too, like there's always an energetic component to like everything that happens in your life. So let's say there is disease. Let's say there is injury, let's say, bad relationship. There's your thoughts ultimately, and that energy controls your reality. It's not the other way around. Thoughts, environment, I should add to that bucket, control your your outcome. And so if you understand that that's the driving force, you can flip anything that happens for the most part. But because environment has a huge play in it all, you sometimes need that added X, Y, and Z to get you. Love this stuff. Love it. So I think that something that was really fascinating that we just kind of riffed on a little bit before as to some beats that we could talk about is going into mythical creatures a little bit. There's so much fear around Dracula, witches, ghosts, and goblins, and ghouls, and whatever it is, the boogeyman, as you said. So I don't know, like, to me, it's similar to what we had talked about before. They're just energetic beings that are misrepresented to create a gap between our powers and real selves and what we have the capability of actually connecting with. So if you want to take a deep dive into that world, share what you
I want to bring up too, I just posted about this recently, but even just mermaids, you know, they have such a bad rap, but usually the tales that they're tied to are tales. They're usually parents that are like making up a story or something to prevent their kids from like hanging out in the ocean by themselves or something like that, you know. So it's created this weird stigma that's then like continuously grown, but it's usually just a misunderstanding of stuff. Also too, I think when I was a kid, I had read somewhere, or I don't know if I thought about it, I'm not sure where it came from, but I had this idea that everything that we imagine exists somewhere. And that kind of started making me like, I was obsessed with vampires as a kid, but that kind of freaked me out really hardcore. And I was like, oh my God, wait a second, are these all existing? Are they around me? You know, and I kind of started to tap into them more. And I realized that literally there's like, I don't know, there's just so many pockets of like beings and collectives and stuff and different realities that I feel like we just think is pretend, but it's actually somewhere happening right now, you know? And I feel like it's just, I don't know, things are all kind of starting to come together, which is cool. Anywho, is there anybody you'd like to start with?
Ooh, let's do vampire since you're more like into
okay. So this energy doesn't necessarily feel very like earthly. I feel like Earth has become this like mishmash of all these different energetic beings and like extraterrestrials, fairies. There's like so much stuff that's just kind of come here. That being said, there's also a lot of portals, which will kind of spill over, but also when we are reaching a creative state, we're raising our frequency and also able to connect with these areas, which may also then allow them to kind of manifest here in some way, not necessarily bad, but you know. So it doesn't necessarily feel earthly. It feels very cold and gray, just the atmosphere. Like it's almost like everything is in black and white. There's one gentleman coming forward. He has like a very long face. He's very like gentlemanly, you know. He's got pronounced cheekbones. He's dressed in like a suit. There are women and children. I feel like they can reproduce, so they're not like dead people. You know, they are shapeshifters, so their physical makeup is not like ours, where it's just like this delicate skin and like whatever. There's this like elasticity in their like skin and joints or something. I don't know, really weird. So they're able to just kind of to transform however they want to. I'm specifically seeing like a lot of bats and a lot of vultures. I don't know why, but I think those are just like preferred animals. They're just able to kind of oversee. Oh, okay. So because they are a little bit more strange, their way of kind of keeping people away is to embody creatures that we don't naturally like. So it's not that they're like these like freaky things, you know, it's more so that they're like, they don't want any weirdness with us. It's like we're the weird ones and they're just trying to ward us off by being these things that we don't want to go around, you know. But then that creates this like weird stigma in us where it's like, oh, they're bad, they're gonna hurt me, they're like whatever, but that's not necessarily the case. I honestly feel like they don't really try to interact with us too much. I feel like they're just kind of doing their own thing. If they are around, it's more for explorational purposes. That is the majority. I feel like just like how we have teenagers that like to break the rules, may just kind of start intertwining with like human people. But for the most part, they're very calm people.
What is their purpose in the universe?
Right when I asked that, I saw him go down. There was like a dead rose or something, and he just kind of touched it, and then it like came back to life. So it's this like, and I heard death and decay, but then I saw this flower. So I think it just has to do with regeneration. I feel like they kind of live in the world that's just after ours, so kind of in that in-between state before you fully pass on. I feel like they just kind of stay there and just try to clear things up, so if there's a lot of weird chaotic energy or something like that, they're kind of there to just kind of transmute it, put things in piles, just kind of organize whatever. They're just more so working on the other side and kind of like doing the dirty work, so to speak, of when we pass on.
Got it. That's so interesting. So where do you think the reputation came from?
I know that I think I've read about there being some kind of like legitimate disease, where like somebody will crave human blood or something like that. A lot of stories do stem from a truthful place. So these beings that can't die, they're already in this in between, but they kind of work with people, and it's like if they're helping us pass over and they take somebody in and then that person never comes back, or they come back as a spirit or something, then it's like, oh, they're taking them, making them one of theirs. It becomes this like elaborate thing. So I feel like all these factors kind of come in, and it's almost like our imagination working that just starts, again, it's like superstitions, it's a way for us to protect ourselves. But then this becomes more commonly adopted, and then things get weird.
Interesting. So is it common for them to around this time of year become more visible in terms of them in their true form in our realm, in our reality?
If they come here, they'll be here more so again in like animal shapes. I'm also seeing wolves. I think they kind of turn into wolves as well. That's another like common one. Just because the veil is thin and because they're kind of like cleaning up all the weird stuff going on, then there is a higher likelihood of them being present because there's more energy present right here. So it's kind of like they need to follow it to make sure nothing crazy goes on, so they will be here more. However, not necessarily like, I'm sure a couple of them have just walked around before, because you wouldn't know, but I don't feel like you're necessarily going to be like, hey, who's this gentleman? It's like, it won't necessarily be this weird interaction.
Well, so should we do werewolves since you just talked about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Werewolves come from, I feel like, a realm that is overlaying Earth's. So more kind of like how the fairy realm is, but this is a different, there's a lot of fire. So I feel like whatever the element of fire, whatever realm that is associated with Earth, it's kind of corresponding in that. It does feel very grounded though, and very earthy. So because they are connected with fire, there's a little bit more of this aggressive nature to them. I don't want to say aggressive, passionate. They're very passionate and just very, they feel deeply and express a lot. They do have a little bit more of a kind of weird nature where I wouldn't necessarily trust one if I was next to one, just because they could just go from 0 to 100 really fast. They can be a little bit more emotional.
So what you do see like in this sci-fi series where suddenly like something switches emotionally or like energetically, environmentally.
It's like the Hulk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way, is it kind of like shape-shifting for them too?
Kind of. I feel like their natural state though is already this like weird hairy humanoid thing. So if they are triggered, I guess, they just become like their eyes kind of dilate weird, so it's, and they like their like mannerisms shift, and I feel like it's like a porcupine where like I don't know, maybe like hair starts to stick out a little bit, but they're not necessarily jumping into a wolf. I feel like they're already like halfway there, and then they just kind of go into this like weird alter ego.
Oh, that makes so much sense. That's so wild. During this time of year, where are they in this world? Are they coexisting with us in a lot of ways?
I don't feel like they really interact too much. I feel like especially during this time of year, they like go into hiding a little bit. If somebody is very empathetic and there's a lot of stuff around you that may be very triggering, it takes a toll on you, so they're just gonna like hibernate for a little bit until it kind of blows over, just because it's a lot.
So when are they most prominent in our reality?
They kind of migrate around. I guess they are specifically attached to that late winter, early spring season. So whenever the area of the world is in that pocket of late winter, early spring, they will be around.
That's so cool. So they're always kind of here, but they're moving constantly.
Yeah.
And what is their purpose in the universe?
Okay, so they are like a pure manifestation of passion, really. They're just that like fiery, passionate kind of feel. However, it's more towards the weird side of passion, where like things get a little
Dark.
kind of imbalanced and a little like, it's a little funky. That feeling is just necessary for us humans to have it. It allows us to learn lessons and whatever, it has its own purpose, but they're just basically manifestations of that kind of energy.
So it's just basically like a degree or so off from, let's say, when we go out into the wild and we are faced with wolves and bears. Like it makes you feel those same types of emotions, right?
Kind of, because they're humanoid, you can kind of it's literally just like a very imbalanced person, so instead of it being like an animal that you can't communicate with, it's like you're a little bit unsure of what they're doing. With them, it's kind of like, oh, I'm having a good day, and then like if you say like, oh, it's cold, what, I was gonna go have a picnic or something, it's just they're just a little bit more emotional, that's all, in an extreme case.
So really like the Hulk.
Yeah.
Well, this is so fun. Okay, so what about, kind of talked about ghosts last time, but do we want to talk a little bit more about ghosts this time of year?
I mean, the veil is thin. There's a lot of energy here. There's a lot of spirits that haven't passed on. There are also a lot of spirits that don't know that they have died. So they will kind of become more prevalent. Also, a lot of people around this time tend to be more willing to communicate with them. So they may try to whip out a Ouija board or do a seance or something. I just recommend caution with that. Always make sure you put a nice protective bubble around you, cleanse your space, cleanse yourself. Just because it's coming from the other side doesn't mean that it's always this like wonderful, loving being, especially if they're stuck in between,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. Witches is definitely more human, in that way. But do we want to talk about the bad rap with that? Because I feel like especially
sure.
We're entering more spirituality in terms of existence. Like, should we go into it a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Especially in the US. I mean, there's such a weird history with that, with like the witch trials and stuff. But honestly, it all just boils down to fear. Especially coming from Christianity, anything that is not coming from God solely, or Jesus or whatever, could be the devil in disguise. So anytime there's any kind of weird manipulation of something or whatever, it's automatically, there's an automatic fear which portrays it as bad. The only time it does get weird is when somebody is trying again to outright affect somebody's free will negatively or positively. Even if you have good, this is a whole nother thing, but even if you have good intentions and you're trying to I don't know, maybe if your friend is struggling and you do a spell to make them get a new job or be happy or something, but if you don't have their permission, that may not be the route they want to take, and that's still technically going against their free will. So even if you have the greatest intentions, you just always need permission.
So if you are, let's say, helping somebody kind of further manifest something that they want, but hypothetically it's not going along their blueprint, I know it's case by case, but will they eventually kind of divert back to what their blueprint is, or is it?
Not necessarily. If somebody's going through something and you take it upon yourself to try to fix it for them or change it some way energetically, you don't have their permission. So that seed is not necessarily being planted. You're trying to manipulate their kind of reality without them agreeing to it, which is where issues arise. And if they decide not to take it, then you will get screwed because it'll kind of turn back at you, and then your like reality will get all weird. If you get their permission and they're actively like working with you or just being like, hey, no problem, you could do whatever the hell you want, they are allowing that energy to be adopted. So there's no resistance. So it will kind of allow that blueprint to change a little bit. Again, like you said, it just kind of depends on the situation. But blueprints are malleable because we have free will. So, this kind of depends.
So it's so fascinating to me because, like, when we come down here, we're privy to our contract, right? We're privy to what the blueprint is going to be and how we can map it out. And then we come down here and we forgot it all, and then we calculate what we agreed to. It's fascinating to me that
it's like the ultimate puzzle game or something.
We are in the Matrix, everyone. We are. Should we do the boogeyman?
Sure. I feel like the boogeyman could be a lot of things. I don't necessarily feel one particular boogeyman, one world of boogeymen. I feel like typically the boogeyman could be just strong energy that's around that is misunderstood. It could be a spirit. It could be somebody that isn't able to pass on, that's just trying to ask for help, that's like knocking, like, hello, I don't know, I need something. They don't know how else to ask for help, and so weird things could happen. You could see things, whatever. The boogeyman could also be more dark energies that are trying to screw with you, however, I feel like those are usually labeled as like a demonic presence more so than like a boogeyman. I feel like the boogeyman, it sounds scary, but there's still like this lightheartedness to it, It could also be like a goblin or something like that. So there are good fairies and there are more bad fairies. However, the fairy realm is very neutral in that there's always good in the bad ones and there's always bad in the good ones. They're never truly like one side or the other. If they're around and your place is a mess and they don't like it, they may come and try to spook you a little bit, or, it's just part of their nature. There's always like this give and take where they're trying to teach you a lesson, but the way that they go about it may not always be like the most acceptable.
Should we talk about fairies? It's not really Halloween themed, but should we do it?
Yeah, sure. Fairies actually will be more apparent during this time as the veil thins, because they are kind of like earth angels in a sense. They will be here to kind of protect you, especially because there's a lot of children out trick-or-treating and stuff. They're kind of like the little guardians that are just kind of like peeking on by. Everything's mischievous, and like this is just like a great thriving time for them.
But I'm sure, especially too with all the costumes, it's like they can not only just like blend in if they want to, but also really stand out and move things around. And let's do mummies.
I mean, what's interesting about them is they are real. They exist. But there's also like sometimes rituals that were done that put like a curse of some sort on the atmosphere that it's around, and because it's like this ancient curse, it makes it this like interesting mystical kind of thing. I feel like it's also very similar with like Native American burial grounds, where if you don't kind of follow the rules set forth, then you're going to get screwed. But it kind of goes back to the idea of you seeing, it's like superstition. If you if you know that something weird's there, but you kind of go for it anyways, and you feel this feeling like, I wonder if something's going to happen, you're automatically accepting it and allowing it to kind of come.
Right. Yeah. It's so fascinating because it's like Halloween has all of these creatures that transcend so many different dimensions and realities that all come from, you know, different stories and fables, and and that's why I think there's also this fear, because there's no real clear line between where they are, what they come from, and what is not real.
I just want to make a note real quick. I don't want to be like, everything's safe, go explore, meet weird things, you know, because I mean, we do have power, but at the same time, we still need to protect ourselves. This is energy, especially like with the werewolves, it's very uncontrollable. So, you know, like I wouldn't recommend just going and trying to find them and like seeing what'll happen. And, you know, you just have to be careful. That's all I want to say. As long as you respect each of these little collectives, you know, you will be fine.
That's a good point. A lot of things that are going to feel very surreal are going to become reality in the years to come. And we have to be as prepared as possible for those things and open-minded as possible for those things. Mm-hmm. But similar to what we are aware of that exists currently in our world, you know, it's interesting because I forget who I was listening to, but there was a really profound statement being like, if we can't even accept different races that humans are, we're never going to be able to accept the reality that is when the veils start thinning and other species start to become more prevalent. And it's inevitable, you guys. Like, it's going to happen, and we have to be able to honor and respect and know how to coexist. And these are big lessons that go beyond just this month. It goes hand in hand with learning how to love, and that's something that is super important too as we enter 5D.
Absolutely. I feel like I brought this example up last time, but I feel like Halloween Town just has everything right. But I feel like it's literally the same thing. There's just a lot of misunderstandings. So they have literally separated themselves in multiple ways. Same with people. The more we can learn to like respect people and just understand that we all come from the same place, it just needs to happen. That's
definitely. This is something that I didn't even think about until you brought it up. How do other realities celebrate this thin veil? That's a great question, by the way.
I know. There's a lot of reality. So I feel, I just heard banging. I feel like, so this specific thinning of the veil, or Halloween at this time, all this stuff, I feel like is more so concentrated to any kind of reality that overlaps our general area, Earth's general area, which is where these like vampire, their world, werewolves are kind of overlapping, fairies, all of these realities that are kind of intertwined with our process are all kind of aligning together. They will specifically be more prevalent. This doesn't exactly answer your question, but I'll go back to it. Alien collectives don't necessarily practice it. There's not necessarily a need to, because they will come and do what they have to do regardless. It's just a different culture, I guess we could say. In terms of fairies, since they are so correlated with Earth, then like how you were saying, the early Celtic practices and stuff, you know, that'll kind of go more hand in hand with like the way they practice. They just will be more involved in harvest and stuff like that. They are also kind of getting ready to just be a little bit more prevalent. There's like protection kind of things going on. I feel like they all have their own little duties almost. So some will go over here and do this thing. Some will go over there and be protectors. Some will whatever. There are some that just come in and just kind of have fun, just, kind of go crazy. I feel like it's, there's this balance between this like freedom to kind of interact with us while at the same time helping us behind the scenes. So they have this like nice balance in the way they kind of view it. Spirits, specifically human spirits that have passed on, I feel like there's like an open door for them to kind of come through and do whatever they need to. That door is always open, but because it takes so much energy for them to kind of come through, it's like they've been like supercharged at this point because the veil is so thin, you know, so it's a lot easier. So there is more activity, and because people are subconsciously a little bit more willing just due to the like holiday. I do feel like the energy on the moon does respond to this thinning of the veil too. So the beings on the moon, and I feel like in all senses, like the general moon body as well as the various kind of collectives on the moon, all kind of line together too, and that lining almost shines down on us in a sense. So there's a lot more like lunar activity, or like that like moon goddess kind of like feminine, I don't know, kind of wave of stuff, you know, just kind of flows through a little bit more too, which then fuels the fairies a little bit more. I feel like it's this like perfect harmony of like everything kind of just kind of goes in this little whirlpool between us and the moon, you know, and things happen.
So we get supercharged by that. That explains a lot too. I was actually talking about this because this fall and colder seasons are much more feminine in terms of energy. So we tend to be called to moon practices or intuitive practices anyway. And yes, you guys, there are beings on the moon. There are beings on the moon. It's interesting that the beings around and on the moon kind of supercharge the beings that want to kind of help us too. It explains why we're all so connected to honoring the moon cycle around this time of year.
Yeah.
Cool. You know what creature we didn't really talk about? Frankenstein.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed with Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster. So just got
goosebumps.
Okay, what's interesting is I don't necessarily feel like he belongs to a specific place, you know, like it feels like a mishmash of stuff, but at the same time, this energy that I'm feeling is so like genuinely wholesome. So there's definitely something there. I feel like there's a deeper reality that he personified when who is the author? I forgot her name.
Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley. Yeah. So Mary Shelley connected, I feel like, to this deeper collective that I feel like he embodies. Oh, wait, hold on. Something's coming through. Okay, what I'm seeing, and I've never seen this before, actually, there are these like little bursts of light almost that look like electricity that can animate physical things in our reality. I don't know where this is coming from, and I don't know if this is something that is even documented, but I feel like there is some kind of myth or some kind of story somewhere of somebody seeing like objects just kind of jumping around, you know, like there's nobody around, they're just kind of jumping around, or it could even be like whale blubber. I'm not really sure. There's just something that it's animated something, and I feel like this does happen. However, it happens more in remote areas, so it's not necessarily something that like the mainstream will see, and I feel like they kind of stem more from the core of Earth. So I feel like it feels fairy, but then not really. I feel like it's just almost like instead of fairies coexisting with us on Earth, it's like these are the beings of the inner Earth, you know, that are just kind of like popping out, whatever reality that is, which I've never actually connected with before, but it feels very like sporadic.
I imagine different from like reptilian inner Earth, right?
Right. Yeah, I feel like Frankenstein's monster, there's a lot of different kind of beings that are being correlated with him. This genuine wholesomeness is very thin. I'm seeing like a sheet. It's like a sheet of energy. So these beings, I feel like, exist throughout the universe, but they're very fine energetically. They're just wispy. It's like a breeze or something like that. I don't feel like they can manipulate matter, but because they're so fine, they can help us with downloads. It's almost like they themselves can like clear out any weird stagnant energy, you know, so they bring on some kind of shifting of some sort as they like move past us. I'm not sure why he's coming forward. I don't know what he has to do with Frankenstein's monster, but nonetheless, I feel like for whatever reason, I'm getting a combo of those two.
That's so interesting. Really cool. Yeah, because it's based off of an author's book, you know, it's very interesting to see the genesis of that kind of come through too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a lot about different things. I love this one. This was so much fun.
This is fun.
We covered the history of Halloween, why we love it so much, all of the cool creatures that get a bad rap, and hopefully that they don't deserve that bad rap, but you know, we all deserve to coexist in some harmonious way, and how they celebrate this time of year, which is so freaking cool. So cool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we did, and